Hello, freaks and geeks. This is Devil's Advocate here. So I have a live hangout with Bob Lewis. He is writing a book. Well, he's already written a book. It's on Amazon, and I have a link in the description for you. Hi, Bob. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you today?
Doing great, doing great. So tell me about your book, man.
Well, I basically wrote the book as a irreverent look at the devastation created by feminism. I link their war on marriage to the rise of crime-ridden communities. I show evidence where feminists actually admit that rape culture isn't real, and we can go in a little bit on that in more detail later. I also document the heartbreaking stories of tragedy, murder, suicide, all caused by feminist discrimination against men. And basically, my book, it's a combination of peer-reviewed research and investigative journalism that proves that feminism was never about equality.
Okay. When you say feminism was never about equality, what do you mean by that?
I mean that it was always about power, and it was always about discrimination against men, even as far back as first wave feminism.
Okay, I've always kind of saw the first wave as I get that they did a whole lot of terrorist types of stuff, but I always kind of held that it was somewhat necessary. Are you saying that it was always about hating men?
Yeah, it was always about hating men, and I want to make sure that something else is abundantly clear too before people kind of get it all twisted and think that I'm a misandrist or a misogynist. The thing about it is that back in the 1700s and 1800s, rights were linked with responsibilities. So you got rights as a citizen, and this was most of the Western world. You got your rights based on what kind of responsibilities you chose to accept. So, for example, back then, women didn't have to work. They didn't have to go get a career. They didn't have to go to college, but they could. They were accepted in colleges as early as mid-1800s. But at least in the United States, and they were actually accepted in colleges in other places or in post-secondary education, college equivalents, even prior to that. But I don't want to tangent there. But the point is that they didn't have any responsibilities. They didn't, other than birthing children, keeping the home kind of safe and secure. They didn't have any responsibilities. Men's job was to work, to be the provider, to be the protector, and to go to war. And so back then, men had more responsibilities than women. In fact, the feminist movement, when they were fighting for suffrage, many feminists were split up because some women didn't want the vote because they didn't want to get drafted to war. So some feminists opposed it and some feminists wanted it, but they didn't want to go to war because they didn't want that additional responsibility that men had to have in order to get the vote.
Okay. Well, when I say I thought the first wave was necessary, I was always told, and I was always shown that women didn't have the right to vote. They didn't have a whole lot of social equality in terms of. I mean, now you can make the argument that they have legal equality, and really that's where it should end. But back then, especially in countries like America, you didn't have the ability to vote. And from what I'm taking from what you're saying is that the right to vote in a lot of these social issues, it kind of stems from the amount of responsibilities that you had.
Yeah, in fact, specifically prior to women's suffrage, in other words, prior to 1920, when they did get the right to vote, the vote was actually not tied by gender. The vote was tied by whether or not you were willing to go to war.
Okay, so that would disqualify a lot of men too.
That's exactly it. In fact, that's why when they did the when African Americans achieved their right to vote, feminists initially opposed it, and so but the idea though was that they had to go to war as well, which is part of the reason. Like if you look at like old Civil War documents, they were like, look, you can become a full voting citizen at the end of the war if you fight for the North, type of thing.
Right. I did notice that when Black men got the right to vote, that that there were a lot of what you would call feminists who were opposed to it, and that really concerned me because I looked at for example, affirmative action, which I personally don't agree with. Now, I could make an argument for it back then, but not now. When I looked at it, there were numerous people. I can't remember the name of the senator. She was a female senator, and I think you would kind of classify her as a feminist. I wrote a whole blog about it. Her whole argument was that it would leave women.
Well,
And when she said women, she wasn't really concerned about every woman. She was only concerned about a certain type of woman.
She was, yeah, and that's exactly what first wave feminism was. You have to understand that, like, these were rich white women. And it's actually kind of funny because this is the same argument that intersectional feminists make today. And on the facts, they're right. And the fact is that feminism was originally created to benefit rich white women who were bored at home. So, and let's break it down even further. When you talk about how women didn't have the same legal rights as men, again, those rights were queued up with responsibilities. But my book documents women even before the United States actually became a country, even before the Revolutionary War. Women owned property. I document a case where these women, they owned 800 acres of property. And before the 1920s, there was a women's only stock market. There were, there was a women's only bank. So I mean, women had these things available to them. Now, were they available to the common woman? Well, no, because it was the rich women that wanted it. In fact, in the late 1800s, I think it was, they even had a women's suffrage convention at the federal capitol in Washington, D.C. If there was a patriarchy, if there was a mythical patriarchy that's goal was to oppress women, then this patriarchy would not have allowed these people to have a suffrage convention at our nation's capital, nor would they allow a suffrage organization to exist in the first place.
Right. I think that is certainly the case, but the thing that I'm worried about is this. I want for feminists to have basically have some kind of point, because I want them to be able to have a voice so that I can debunk them. But at the same time, when you look at history, I don't think history supports what a lot of them are saying. Like, for example,
history doesn't support anything they're saying, and
right.
so you and I are on the same page. I believe that look, I'm not a misogynist. I believe women should have equal rights, but here's the thing: women do. Women in the United States and the Western world have had equal rights to men since the passage of the Equal Pay Act of 1963, signed by JFK.
Right. Well, the thing is that, again, their argument would be that because women make different choices, that's somehow inequality. Like I remember I was having a discussion with one person who's a friend of me on Facebook, and we actually met, me and you. So I had a discussion with her, and she works in the tech field, and she was trying to convince me that because women don't pick that field because they are discouraged, that's oppression, and we should make laws against it. And it's like, okay, well, you have equal pay under the law. No one can pay you less for being a woman. At least no say that. And my question is, what do you do about this idea that no matter what happens, there's this social pressure that you can't prove, but you can claim it. What do we do to debunk that? I personally know, and I'm asking but I want to know, how do you deal with that?
Well, first and foremost, they just debunk themselves. It's just in this first statement that you made. The first statement that you made is that this woman told you, she says, look, women make different life choices and they're not represented, and that's oppression. Well, let me tell you something. We're adults. When you're 18 years old, no one can save you but you. The idea of equality in the United States and the Western world is equality of opportunity. That's what Martin Luther King, that's what Malcolm X, that's what the original civil rights leaders fought for. They understood that you had to succeed or fail based on the quality of your investment and the quality of your character. You weren't supposed to, look, just because you got on the playing field doesn't mean you get a participation trophy. That's all I'm saying. So when these women come to you, and when they come to me and they say, well, women make different life choices, and when they make different life choices, they make less money. Well, guess what? Make different choices.
Right.
It's not my turn to babysit you. If you see, that's
basically the same argument that I make with the Black community. When I actually did some research, I was finding out that a lot of Black people, they were majoring things doesn't really pay money, things like African American history studies, that kind of stuff. So it's like I try to make the same argument, and they're like, well, we're paid less because we're black. And
No.
it's like, no, that's not legal. You can't do that.
Well,
And so I can imagine your frustration.
Yeah, they were lied to. And one of the points I make in my book is, look, let's take a look at feminism and let's put it side by side. And I'm going to do this but I'm going to do it for a different reason. So I want to make sure I explain this. But when you take feminism, right, as a movement, as an ideology, and anybody who says that feminism represents all women, you know what? The 2016 election tends to disagree with you.
Right.
But this idea that Nazi Germany only had 10 years to change the ideology of Germany and the Germanic peoples, right? And we are still seeing the impact of that ideology, that white nationalist, that white racist ideology. We're seeing that almost 100 years later, just as strong as it was back then. Now, you take that and you contrast it with feminist ideology. Now, feminism didn't come into like serious power until probably the second wave in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s. And so feminism has had 100 years to brainwash these people with their ideology. So you have this guy who he's been sold a lie, and he's been told, look, if you go to college and you major in African American studies, you'll have a college degree when you're done. And this is true, but the question you got to ask yourself is, what does it matter if that college degree means you're flipping burgers at McDonald's for minimum wage?
Right. Well,
you have to get a degree in an employable skill.
Right. But again, they have this mindset, whereas because something bad happens, that means something else. Like I'll give you a prime example. There are a lot of gender studies majors. A lot of them happen to be feminists. I mean, I very rarely meet gender studies majors who are not feminists, because I went to college.
Oh yeah.
So I've noticed that, and so a lot of them tend to go into HR fields, and so what has happened as a result, when you look at places like Silicon Valley in California, you're noticing that a lot of companies are automating HR now. There's so many sexual harassment complaints. There's been so many complaints, so many human, that the way that HR sees it is, we're gonna make this algorithm. We're basically gonna make this software, and that's gonna do a lot of the stuff that HR used to actually do. And so you finding some gender studies majors who are not being hired in places like California, and now they are saying it's because of sexism. It's like, well, no, you went into a field and you made problems, and so people are like, fuck this, I'm going to automate HR now. And basically, I remember I was talking to one of my friends, Doge. I'm not going to say his real name because he works in Silicon Valley in California.
Sure.
But he was kind of explaining it like this, and he's like a software tech person. I don't know his exact title.
Right.
But he was basically saying that, hey, I'm going to design this software, and if you claim that I'm being racist, I'm going to go into the courtroom and I'm going to put this giant computer onto the judge's desk. I'm like, hey, here's the source code. Find the racism.
Right.
What they're doing now. So
well, but you also have to understand too, the problem that you have with human resources is that human resources is not a settled industry. Human resources it's a young industry. It's not settled. There's no like standards. There's no professional standards, and they're trying to create standards, but the standards they have are a joke. And if you look at major companies that have relied on human resources as opposed to like project managers and the people that are actually like the supervisors who are working on the line, for example, whether it be a software assembly line or a blue collar assembly line or anything else, it's the managers who have the experience, who knows what's going on. Half the time, these human resources people, even those without gender studies degrees, don't really know the job that they're trying to hire for. So, you know, they don't know whether or not a person's a good fit or not, other than what's on paper. So that, you know, you have that challenge on top of that. And then when you look at gender studies, I like to refer to that as it is a degree in discrimination. When gender studies first was created, it was not called gender studies. It was called women's studies. And it wasn't created just like the domestic violence interventions programs we have in the United States. Gender studies and women's studies was not created as a result of people saying, we have a need for this. It was a result of a bunch of women getting angry and protesting outside of colleges until the colleges were like, Jesus Christ, these women won't shut up. Yeah, we'll give you a course. And then there it went.
So, a quick question though. Do you think that gender studies has a place in society?
No,
Okay.
no. And
Okay.
but I'm going to say this as well. I also don't believe that, you know, I'm Latino. I don't believe that Latino studies has a place in society. I don't believe that African American studies has a place in society. I don't believe women's studies have a place in society. I think that if you really want to talk about those things, you need to do it in the context of a history major or a history course, and that there should be elements within that course so that you're looking at from, see, the problem is that everybody is looking at everything from an ethnocentric perspective. And so when you look at it from an ethnocentric perspective, you say, my my ethnicity or my culture is better than yours. So you look at it from like a
Right.
prejudicial standpoint. But if you look at history, the best history professors teach from what's called a culturally relative perspective. Now, that means that even though they may believe that their race is better, they're teaching their students how to critically think. And so in addition to teaching history, they're saying, well, yeah, the Aztecs did this way and they sacrificed these people. I may not agree with it, but this is what they did it, and this is why they said they did it. And I think that you could do the same thing with African Americans or Caribbeans or South Americans or women or anything that you want to talk about. You could use it and plug it in as a segment into those other course tracks. But I think that the reality is that when you create a gender studies bachelor's degree or a gender studies master's degree, or even a gender studies associate's degree, you are doing your students a disservice because you are not equipping them to be citizens who can contribute to society. Because, I mean, can a gender studies person be a garbage man? Can they work in a utility company? Can they work for a power company? Can they work for, something other than retail? I mean, gender studies is just a degree in discrimination.
Right. I was gonna make another argument for integrating a lot of these studies. Is that I'll give you a prime example. We know that the firearm was actually originated in China. I'm not sure.
Right.
I think it's yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
I think it's actually China. So how can you really discuss the history of certain countries in the context of like warfare if you don't mention how the firearm is actually made? So you have to kind of understand multiple things to understand the human condition. So I think that when you start singling out certain genders or certain ethnicities, you're going to run into problems because you don't understand the full context of the human condition.
Well, and the bigger issue is that you have to make, when you're a college professor or you're even a high school teacher or a junior high teacher or an elementary teacher, you have an ethical obligation to teach your students. But what's happening is that we're seeing our education system from kindergarten on up. Teachers are not teaching students anymore. They are indoctrinating students.
Right.
And
I was actually working on a video I was going to talk about that because I could show you some stuff, man, that will just make your blood boil. I was watching a video of an AP English course that was doing a diversity experiment, and so what they were doing was this teacher took these students and lined them up in a straight line and had them taking a step forward or backwards based off of their identity or I mean it was crazy shit. Like it was basically she was getting them to enact the progressive stack,
right,
a physical manifestation of the progressive stack. If that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will.
Well, and this, here's the thing, the science already supports opposing this. And the biggest challenge you have, and you see this in feminism today, and the example I'm going to use is the Stanford prison study from the 70s. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but I'm going to explain it to your viewers. Basically, in real broad terms, in real general terms, they did a study in Stanford, and they wanted to see how power worked. In other words, the power structures amongst communities. And what they did was they said, okay, we're going to do this study, and we're going to have prisoners and we're going to have jailers. And so they got everybody together and they counted them off, 1, 2, 1, 2. And some of these people were minorities. Some of them were, Caucasians, people from different cultures, that kind of thing, who participated. It didn't matter. The point was that they had 2 designations. If you were white or black, it didn't matter. If you were a 1, you were a jailer. If you were a 2, you were a prisoner. And what they found is that the people who were the jailers, didn't matter what culture they came from, didn't matter the socioeconomic background, they became discriminatory. They abused their power. And the people who were the prisoners, white, black, didn't matter, they were discriminated against and they were victimized. And it created such an uproar, they had to stop the study for ethical reasons. Now, when you look at feminism today, you see that on a macro global scale. And the perfect example is the new Wonder Woman movie. Feminists have excluded men from the first showing of this movie at a theater. And then they turn around and say, I don't understand what your problem is with us excluding you as some form of segregation.
Right. I was gonna kind of extrapolate that some because I saw that story and I was
like,
what?
I mean, okay, and look, you got Harvard. Harvard is, I write about civil rights. Before I wrote my book, I'm a published author. I've written articles for a couple different places that have been published, and I write about civil rights. And I'll tell you what, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, every prominent leader from that time period, every prominent activist, they would be rolling over their graves right now if they found out that Harvard self-segregated for graduation.
Right. Well, there's been some recent arguments made, and I can somewhat agree with some of the arguments that Martin Luther King was a little bit more radical than people want to give him credit for.
Oh, he was. He was. I would agree with that.
He was a little bit more radical. But his overall message was, hey, guys, let's stop being dicks. Let's just try to treat people as humans. That was his overall message. And then Malcolm X, and that's the one thing. I used to be a Muslim, so I can kind of tell you that Malcolm X is a little bit more extreme than people think he was, than people thought he was, because
he definitely had a public face. Yeah.
Well, the one thing I know about Islam, especially like Black Islam, is that it's a little bit more racist than people want to actually realize. Especially when you look at some of the tweets from people from Black Lives Matter, some of the most radical tweets, man, and the most fuck white people types of tweets is coming out of the Muslim part of Black Lives Matter, and that's for a reason.
And I'll tell you what, the whole social justice movement was created by feminists.
Right. I think that it is cultural Marxism, but I do think that, and bear with me before people freak out. I think that had they stuck to the whole classism argument with Karl Marx, they would have had a much better message, because you could actually show where class does actually matter. But then they kind of went to intersectionality, and that's when things blew up, because people don't understand how this works. Intersectionality, and excuse my stutter. It kind of works like this. It is a never-ending worm that constantly eats people. And by that I mean this: these people started off as cultural Marxists, but then you look at Black Lives Matter. Alicia Garza, she actually wrote. I can't remember which publication it actually was, but I featured it in multiple videos. She actually wrote that you could be a white guy from Appalachia and be poor and still have privilege. So she completely got away from Marx's original message of classism. He preached that so much that it was ridiculous, because when you read his earlier works, you could see where he was making most of his arguments from him hating classism. But then social justice, they are so delusional that they don't even realize that Karl Marx, the very guy that they are worshiping, he would have hated them because they actually got away from classism. They have went full retard. Right. They have went to every argument that totally disproves everything that he's saying. Because if you are saying that you could be a white person and be poor and still be privileged, well, then that has nothing to actually do with classism. It's all to do with your identity.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that is there was a guy who was a Russian defector who defected to the United States in like the late 70s, early 80s. He was interviewed, and you can see his videos online. They're on YouTube. I think his name is Yuri Bezanov. And Yuri Bezanov actually foretold the social justice movement in '84. There's footage of him on YouTube where he talks about it in detail. And the thing about it is one of the things he said is he said during the Cold War, the Russia's, the KGB's goal was not like to be like the James Bond style super spy. The goal was to change the culture. It was to change the belief systems from a capitalistic or a free market style system to overgeneralize, compared to a socialist / communist system. And he actually used the words social justice before anybody ever thought about it. And the thing that's important is that when you're indoctrinated like this, like Hitler had created the Hitler Youth, right? These social justice warriors are indoctrinated in school. They are being taught this in school. They're indoctrinated to believe a certain way. So it's like cult conditioning. And when they're taught this, you have an entire generation that cannot be, it's irreversible. So his solution was, when that happens, you have to teach the whole next generation to deprogram them, because the other people, most of them, at least half of them, are a lost cause. So the problem you have now is that feminism runs Western English-speaking society and the Western world.
Well, the thing is that I think that honestly we could take a hands-off approach to some of this stuff, because I think that YouTube and popular television personalities and the internet really is doing a number on feminism and social justice. And by that I mean this: if you look at Generation Z, I don't think they're really receptive to the whole the whole intersectional bullshit. I think that they are pretty much memeing it out of existence. And I think that basically, and you may or may not like Paul Joseph Watson, but I think he had a pretty good point when he said that conservatism is the new counterculture. At one point, especially during like the 90s and like the 80s and the 70s, you know, the political the whole political scheme was conservatism was actually bad. If you were a hippie, if you were more super duper hippie and you like to smoke your weed and you like, oh, fuck the man, you know, if you're a type person that would say something like that, then that was actually cool. You know, you in back in the 90s, you had like Marilyn Manson. You know, you had people who were generally left leaning.
Yeah,
who were actually cool.
Yeah, but the problem that you have though is, and I agree with I listen to Paul Joseph Watson, and I agree with a lot of what he says, and I agree with everything that you've just said. The problem though is that, and I don't mean any disrespect to you,
right?
But I was a paralegal for 10 years. I was on the front line of family law. I did every kind of family law you can think of. I even helped out with appeals issues.
I'm sorry, man.
I did legal research. I wrote briefs. I interviewed, you know, clients. I also did some of the background investigations. And so I'm saying this with an understanding, so you understand kind of where I'm coming from in my perspective. My perspective is this: there is an extremely important, vital element that is missing from the common sense versus social justice debate, and that element is the legal issues.
Right.
We are just beating them left and right on the internet, on TV, on anytime they come out with some stupid social justice thing, we are just there to drop the hammer on them. The problem is that we are not there when it comes to the vote. We are not there when it comes to the passage of laws. We are not there when it comes to the gender biased family court justices in the entire system. We are not there when it comes to you know, who we're electing. And the issue is that feminism has done such a fantastic job of indoctrinating the populace that women now vote 52 to 54% of the time while men are working. And the simple solution for this is to make Election Day a holiday. And barring making it a holiday, men and those who oppose feminism, they need to take the day off of work. They need to use a holiday. They need to use a vacation day. They need to pre-plan that day to get off of work so that they can vote. Because the challenge is, like, if you look at the 2016 election, we have a population in the United States of somewhere around 340 million people. Of that 340 million people, somewhere around 220 million people are voting age. Of the people that voted, only of that voting age population, only 25% of that population voted for Hillary, and only 25% of that population voted for Trump. So you have a 50% or over 100 million people who didn't vote in the general election, who are the silent majority, and those are the people who pay the price for it. Now, I don't think that leveling criticism against those people and saying that they're irresponsible is the right method to motivate them, because the reality is that our country is suffering economically, and we're all paycheck to paycheck, and very few of us have a large we have a large store of money in case of an emergency. And so many of us have to work on those days. But I think that if we as a community and we as a society, we took our responsibility, and it's one of our strongest rights we have is the vote. But if we took that responsibility more seriously, like we do sports games and football games and things like that, and we started voting, then that's where the change is going to come. Because as much as we're making gains in social media, and as much as we're making gains on the street, and as much as we're making gains everywhere in society, guess what? Misogyny is now a hate crime in a portion of Manchester. In California, they're now talking about a law that if your condom comes off during sex accidentally, or if your condom breaks, it's considered stealthing, and they're characterizing it as rape, even though the sex is consensual. So you have to understand that even though these other things are happening, and they're fantastic things, and people need to continue to do these things, we are missing the legal side, which I'll tell you right now, it's half the battle. And, and so when I say that feminism is one, it's because all governments have feminists, all judiciary, in every county in the United States, there are feminists in the prosecutor's office. The family courts are run in every county in the United States. They're run by feminists. And so when you have a man-hating ideology that hates men and wants to discriminate against men, they victimize men to make themselves feel good. They create a false enemy to pretend to be heroes.
Right. I don't think I would disagree with you on is I think that a lot of people see feminism as just man-hating. Oh, they hate women too. It's especially depending on who those women are.
Well, yeah, and that's why when you hear me talk about feminism, you hear me talk about it as an ideology.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Barian the other day, and I was on a stream with Barian, and Barian and I were talking, and Barian tried to use feminism equals all women. I was like, well, you got to slow your roll there for a minute. I said, because if you look at feminism is not all women, and that's the problem with most people who talk about it. People drink the Kool-Aid and they listen to the feminist indoctrination of the way feminism changes language and manipulates language, and then they make the mistake of assuming that feminism represents all women. Feminism is a political, social ideology similar to Marxism, similar to capitalism, similar to all these different things. And you can see this because it was women who put Trump in the White House, and they were not feminists.
Right. Well, again, I think that feminism has, especially social justice in every type of ideology that is similar to it. It has a way of dividing people. And when I say dividing people, back in the old days, you had this kind of thing of state pride. And you have the political left now, and I don't know if you're leftist or anything, but I'm just gonna be honest with you because I live in South Carolina. So the one thing that I've noticed is that there is this idea of dividing people within their own territories to not make them feel pride. Like, for example, with the whole Confederate flag thing, with the whole state, the whole state fucking flag things, you had this almost rivalry with states. Yeah. And these people, again, we will sit there and call them globalists. Do you think that type of mindset just stops with like other countries? No, it actually starts within your country. You don't want people to have individual rights because when you do that, you give states rights and you stop that rivalry. So back in the old days, you had people voting like crazy, partially because they wanted to compete with other states, especially in a place like freaking South Carolina. So when you
in South Carolina. You talk about the history of South Carolina, they were trying to push that vote to compete financially.
Right. But again, you had the competition there.
Right.
But people, especially on the political left, they want this idea that we have to vote as a collective because of reasons. But the thing is, they don't even get the electoral college is not done as a collective. It is done state by state. And so they have removed the very idea of competition between states. And I think that has a lot to do with why people in individual states have stopped voting to such a large degree.
I would agree with that, but I also agree that the big challenge that you have is that you've had liberal politicians, and I'm going to say this right now, and I used to be leftist. I'm a recovering leftist, but I'm gonna say this right now, and your audience can hate me or love me for it. I really don't care.
Right.
But you have liberal politicians on the national level, and pardon my French, they're fucking your communities. Okay.
Yeah.
They are fucking your communities. And what I mean by that is, I don't care if they're a Republican. I don't care if they're GOP. I don't care if they're Tea Party. If they are elected and they are part of the establishment, let me tell you something. They are bought and paid for prostitutes. And they are voting against common interests. They are destroying American jobs in local communities. And in so doing, they're creating a desperate electorate. And what you saw in the 2016 election was everybody said, you know what? We are done. We are going to soft rebel, and we're going to put somebody in power who is an outsider, and there is nothing you can do about it. And you see the Democratic Party is actually in shambles right now. And after that lawsuit against the DNC, I'm actually surprised that there's anybody left in the Democratic Party, because when they admitted to being a totalitarian regime at the DNC, everybody at that point should have left, because their vote doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Here's a part that I'm really kind of pissed off at is that more people haven't figured it out. Back in 1996, the DNC was rigging fucking elections. If you look at the Federal Election Commission, back in '96, they're saying that Bill Clinton, some Chinese foreign nationals, and the DNC itself, they actually were colluding with Chinese foreign nationals, and so the Federal Election Commission, the very same federal body that is responsible for punishing people who do this shit, they gave out the largest single fine ever given out to a national committee for a political party. They shelled out $719,000 for a fine. Right. And what shocks me is, if you're willing to use foreign nationals to that extent to rig general elections and local elections, why is anyone shocked by this? How come it takes people like you and Paul Joseph Watson or me or freaking Styx Hectorhammer or the hard bastard to say this for people to actually go and look it up themselves? I found this stuff just by looking.
But you have to understand, though, that people have been groomed to agree and to believe the establishment media. And so when the establishment media has been lying to you so long, and you have see, here's the thing, like you look at CNN, for example, you want to talk about fake news, and I've watched a lot of CNN in my lifetime, but you want to look at fake news. CNN retracts articles all the time. They issue retractions all the time, because their goal isn't to report the news. Their goal is to change public opinion. And there's even a person from MSNBC who was upset at Trump because she said that it was the newscaster's job to form public opinion. It wasn't Trump's. And because he was bypassing them with social media, they're like, yeah, this has to stop. And she's on video saying this. So, you know, you have to understand that when you're looking at this, you're talking about large scale indoctrination. And I'm not going to go like that whole NWO route or, you know, New World Order or anything like that. My personal opinion is that if you stop feminism as an ideology, you address most of these problems, because then children start getting educated again. Did you know that in Australia, the Victoria School District, it was like 300 schools, they all signed this this piece of paper that said that they would help their students transition to the opposite gender without parent permission. But yet the American College of Pediatricians has come out and said that gender theory harms children. They even put out a press release. They said it's child abuse. So, but this is a product of feminism, the whole trans ideology, which, by the way, has zero support in biology. The idea of you know, anything other than XX or XY chromosome, and all the rest of it, you know, even though there's like a minor amount of it, those are all classified as mutations. Science has already addressed this.
Right. Well, I think what these people do is they actually play on people's emotions, and
sure.
and so basically, it works kind of like a religion. if you can convince someone that something is bad based on religion, but they're not really explaining why, they're just saying it's actually bad. It's just really, really bad. And so what they do is they will extrapolate and they will extrapolate and they will extrapolate off of the extrapolation, and it will go on and on and on and on and on. And this is why I tell people to not give them any room. If you give them one step, they will take a lifetime journey with it. And I'm not saying this as someone who hasn't been deep in social justice. I'm telling you, like it is really bad. And I really, I don't want to say this, but I kind of got upset when you mentioned how they are indoctrinating children. I'm gonna show you a picture in a second. I'm gonna send it to you on social media, and I'm gonna ask you to read the title of this paper and tell me what you think. I wrote this paper in 9th grade. Okay, and mind you, my teacher was a feminist, and she would tell everyone, "I'm a feminist. I'm a feminist. I'm a feminist." So I'm gonna show you this. It's a picture, and I'm gonna ask you, what do you think?
All right.
Because it was really, really bad. So I learned from a very early age that there was indoctrination that was going on, and it was very, very subtle. It wasn't so much how they told you to write papers. It was how they want you to frame the writing of those papers.
Well, exactly. They tell you how to think as opposed to what to think, or I mean, what to think instead of how to think. And and here's the thing: is that there's elements of the African American community that were red pilled before the white community was.
Right.
I believe, I'm not a big fan of Tommy Sotomayor, but Tommy Sotomayor says that the African American community is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to social issues, and I firmly believe that to be true.
I sent it to you. I'm gonna ask you to read the title of it.
Oh, The Interpretation of Oppression. That is hilarious.
I wrote that in 9th grade.
That's perfect. That is perfect.
Is that sound like indoctrination to you?
Oh, yeah, they're trying.
Yeah. So when I was in grade school, I was always told that that because I was Black, that I would have to work harder. And when I got out of grade school and when I went into the military and I went to college, I found that honestly, there was a lot of white people who were doing a lot worse off than me. And I did not work nearly as hard as they did. I just noticed that personally.
Oh, you're right. And the problem is, again, it's a question of skill set. It's not a question of anything else. And, and here's the thing, like I've worked like I said, I'm Latino. And so I've worked around, white supremacists, white separatists and things. And I'll tell you, I got along with them just fine. And once they understood of me as an individual and they understood me for my character, they were like, yeah, I can work with you. Yeah, I can do stuff with you. The challenge is that the people that are the white supremacists are just as misinformed as the social justice warriors, just on different grounds. But the thing that I will give white supremacists over most social justice warriors is that white supremacist opinions will change with facts.
Right. And then they will at least talk to you even if they don't agree. Like
Absolutely.
I live in South Carolina. So I've met some white supremacists.
Oh,
I used to live like next to one. It's an old white lady. And so when she first moved in, she didn't really like me. She would not talk to me. She wouldn't interact with me. And so one day I asked her why, and she kind of explained the entire era that she came up in. And so we got to talking, and through my actions and how I was so kind to her and how she was eventually kind to me, she ended up calling me her son. I'm Black as shit, and she's a fucking white supremacist. And she even flat out said it. She's like basically, I am what you would consider a white supremacist. She even flat out said it, but she still considers me like a son because, I think that's the key to solving a lot of these issues, is just having conversations.
Well, it's a question, instead of focusing on the differences, it's focusing on the common ground.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, I think everybody needs to call out bullshit when they see it. But here's the thing, like, to take a step back, when you were saying about how social justice was indoctrinating people, I take it like this, and I don't care where a person comes from. I go from this perspective. If you lie to me once, what else are you lying about?
Right.
And so let's apply that to feminism and social justice. Okay, feminists today say there's a wage gap. My book demonstrates that is a flat out lie, and that there have been laws in place since 1963 that protect women's rights to equal pay for equal work for equal responsibility. So I know that's a lie. So what else are you lying about? Oh, you're saying now that women are underrepresented in college. No, women have 33% more people in college today than men do. So I know that's a lie. What else are you lying about? Okay, well, a study just came out a couple years ago, and it was reaffirmed and peer reviewed that women commit more domestic violence than men. Okay, that's a lie. So now what else are we lying about? So in 2014, RAIN, I think it's called it's the Abuse Incest National Network, Rape Abuse Incest National Network. It's a feminist organization that opposes rape, sexual assault, abuse, and that whole thing. They stand against it. They're trying to protect people. They're a great organization, but they're feminists, and they push this 1 in 5 rape thing, 1 in 4 rape thing. They wrote the Department of Justice in 2014. Their president and one of their upper level people, they wrote the Department of Justice, and this letter is publicly available, and I cite it in my book, where they admit rape culture does not exist.
Right.
So rape culture is a lie. So, and so in the course of just 10 minutes, I have just destroyed almost the entire core of feminist ideology. Now, if you extrapolate that out to social justice, now we look at social justice, and let's just take a quick analysis of social justice. Transgenderism is defined as a mental health condition. It always has been. And the difference between transgender and being homosexual is not considered a mental health issue. Now, there was some discrimination back in the day where it was, whatever, you want to suck that dick, that's you, don't push it on me. And we're moving on with our day. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay, so we know transgender is a lie. Now we look at social justice, and we look at what else do they support? Well, this idea of intersectionality says the oppressed, this is what they teach, the oppressed cannot be the oppressor. Now, they use this to commit hate crimes against white Caucasian people. They use this to commit hate crimes against anyone who supports white Caucasian people. And so you see, and these don't get me wrong, don't get it twisted, these are hate crimes. They do not want integration. They want segregation in the form of safe spaces. And they cannot communicate. They cannot defend their ideology. So we got, dozens and dozens of videos of them having mental health breakdowns, because what happens is what you're seeing there, even though it's funny to watch, the tragic part is what you're seeing is those people have been so indoctrinated. They're actually having a mental breakdown because the facts don't agree with what they've been indoctrinated to believe. So the cognitive dissonance, it breaks, and what you're witnessing is emotional breaks. And so we're having this mental health tragedy on a large scale, and that is not good for the community. And so it's all hypocrisy.
Well, I think that there's one point that I think I got out of all that. It was some point that I've been making for a long time, is that if you accept anything that you've just debunked, if you got an average person who accepts anything that you've clearly just shown to be bullshit, they can take that one thing that you've already accepted, and they can extrapolate more bullshit.
Right.
That's the problem. That's the whole scary thing. That it's a never-ending cycle with these people.
Well, and that's why I wrote my book. I wrote my book because it's not just discussing the social justice side. I have peer-reviewed science. I have legal professionals. I have legal scholars in my book where I talk about these things. So it's not just the author who goes by Bob Lewis, by the way, which is a pen name. It's not just that, my opinion. It's my opinion based on scientific evidence and conclusions and investigative journalism and firsthand reports of people doing this. And it's, the book is, there's parts of the book that are hard to read, but you're absolutely right. It's like they get that one little piece open. Okay, you can accept that one thing. All right, we're going to brainwash you with the rest.
Well, let me just take a quick pause to give some shout outs to people who are watching. Warp Reflection, how you doing? Vincerine Torix, I want to say. There is Whiplash, he's in the Army, go Army. And there is the hero Mega Galade. This guy's name I'm going to say is QNTKKA. How you doing? You're always in the live streams. And Ken Lee. So, but back to our discussion. The thing is that that's what worries me about it, because they have so much fiction out there that it's a very big net, and that net is designed to catch at least one thing that you really like. And if they can get you with that one part of the net, they can drag you into the rest of it. And that really bothers me, man. It's like they, and again, for most adults, I think most adults can see past this, but they do this to children, and they use emotional manipulation to push their bullshit onto children. It's like, how do I stop this? What do I do to stop this? Because I have a son. I have no idea. I mean, I don't want to start.
I think the foundation is trust, right? So right. I was married twice. I was divorced twice. I won custody of my children twice. And I don't know if you know this about me or not, but I'm gonna share it. It's in the back of the book about the author. My first marriage, my ex-wife met a man who sexually assaulted both of my older two children. And when I stepped up to try to stop it, a gender-biased family court and a bunch of feminists said that I was the one being abusive because I tried to protect my kids. They took my children from me and they put him in the rapist's home for 5 years, where he raped and physically and sexually abused them 5 and 6 days a week for 5 years.
Wow.
So I fought the courts that entire time. I eventually won. I eventually rescued them. My family will never be the same. But the thing about it is, and the upside of it is this: as much as they try to indoctrinate those children, as much as they victimize their children, as much as they harm those children, my kids trusted me. And I was able to stay in their life enough that when they finally got the courage to tell me, I was the first one they told.
Wow.
And I was waiting for it. I was waiting for the opportunity, because I knew that if I had an opportunity to kill this guy, and I knew that if I killed him, my ex would just find some other piece of shit, and then he would end up abusing him, and either I'd be in jail or something else would happen. You know, and that's just, I knew that I was the only one who was going to care for my kids. So I had to have the wherewithal to fight through those emotions to kill this guy, to make sure my kids were safe.
Wow.
And so you have to understand, though, you know, that requires a level of mental fortitude that we don't teach our children anymore.
Right.
And my children learned enough of that from me, even though I was only seeing them every other weekend, that when it did come out, they came to me first and told me. Like when I finally got it to a point where I was ready. Like I had set up things in place so that when because I knew that one day they might come out and tell me. So I made sure that everything was set up so that the family court couldn't use this gender-biased feminist system to see. They wanted to destroy me so bad they didn't care who got victimized in the trade. So the guardian ad litem knew what was going on. My ex-wife knew what was going on. Obviously the rapist knew. The courts knew, and nobody cared. Even the police detective was a feminist, and she wouldn't even leave her desk to conduct an investigation. It was a complete travesty of justice. And my case is not the only case like that. So, but a lot of guys commit suicide, or you hear about these shootings and things, and it's because they were discriminated against that drove them over the edge. But the takeaway is this: my children eventually found the strength to come to me. You know?
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, to bring that full circle, now that I've kind of emotionally recovered from that little story, when it comes to that, relationships are built on trust. If you have a relationship with your children where they trust you and you trust them, not necessarily 100%, but where it counts, you can show your children and teach them the hypocrisy, and they get it. So like I have a son now, my youngest son is 17, and he sees bullshit for what it is, and he listens to these teachers try to indoctrinate him in school, and he knows the truth of it. He's been red pilled.
Right.
So what this does is what I'm telling you is that how do you teach your children? You teach them as the parent, and you tell them to trust you first, and you show them why they should trust you first, and you demonstrate to them what hypocrisy looks like. You give your children the civics lessons that they should have gotten in school, because we are not teaching civics anymore. We are not teaching civil rights anymore, and we are not teaching how our government systems work anymore. And so as a parent, we have to make sure that we have these conversations with our children, so that when the teacher does it, they automatically go, and go from there. Now, the advantage of it is children at some point are going to have that. They're going to have that part of the child union contract is to rebel against adults, right? So the idea is that you teach them early enough so that when they become teenagers and they start rebelling, they're rebelling against the social justice indoctrination. They're not rebelling against you. And then when they see you back them up when they rebel, that emboldens them and it gives them a stronger spine. And so, the challenge is being a good parent. And a lot of the people that are out there, they're divorced, kids are raised in broken homes. And so they don't have that two-parent opportunity. And so, how do you teach your children? You keep that close relationship. You do things with them. You have FaceTime with them. You spend time with them. And you make that investment, because as a parent, your children truly are your future. And that's just, and there's no shortcut.
I totally get that. I mean, and I really think that what you're saying is true. Is just that I'm coming from. I guess I should kind of show my background. I worked at the Department of Juvenile Justice in South Carolina as a mental health professional. I started off before I actually got my master's. I had to start off as juvenile correctional officer. And so when I got my master's degree in psychology, I moved up to be a social worker. And they classified me as a psychologist because in South Carolina, you only need a master's degree. So I worked with children, and I kind of understand indoctrination. I understand how kids think, at least the really troubled ones. And so when I ask, how do you defend against this? I mean, if you've seen the extent of what we're talking about.
Yeah, but the children you work with don't trust anybody. The children you work with don't trust anybody.
Right. They don't trust anybody. Yeah, true.
So all you got to do is show them where the dishonesty lies and let them do their own thing. They'll figure it out from there.
Right. I'm always I never base things that I talk about off of the best case scenario. I always try to. People always ask, with some of my heavy research videos, like, how come you have so many links in the description? Why do you go through the trouble of making videos that are like 6 gigs? Why do you go through the trouble of putting things on the screens? Because again, I want to make things so simple that a child could understand it. And so again, I'm looking at it from the lowest common denominator, and I'm not calling anybody stupid.
No.
Right.
But the simplest way, the most effective way, is to keep it simple.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this too, so that we're on the same page. I was raised in foster care. I was 15 of 18 years in foster care.
Wow.
And so, speaking as a 10-year professional paralegal and as a foster child, once you lie to me, I'm going to start looking for what else you've lied about. But if somebody tells me that you lied to me, and I can they can demonstrate it in an irrefutable way, from that point forward, it's game on. So when it comes to like the children that you're working with and these kids of broken homes, all you got to do is show them where the lie is. Once you show them where one of the lies is, once you show them a crack in the armor, and you show them it's a better way, then there you go. It's like, like in the military, right? You go through basic training, and they use basic training to break down your childhood conditioning so that they can create a man out of you.
Right.
It's the same thing. But you do it in time. Now, is everybody going to take it? No, because some people don't have the emotional fortitude, or they don't have the maturity or the wisdom, just because of who they are. They don't have that wisdom to get the message right then and there. But they may get it 2 years down the road, as long as you just provide them the access to the knowledge. So, is there a defense against it? It depends on if somebody wants it. If they're in their own perfect paradise, there's nothing you can do.
Right. Well, I want to ask you one last question, and then I have to run. So one last question, okay, and it's a very important question. So you have to get this one right.
Okay.
How much is your book, and where can we find it?
My book is it's on Amazon,
Okay,
and it's $8.99.
8.99.
And yeah, the ebook is out now. I'm in the process of proofing the paperback, and it's already been distributed to the Apple Store. It's been distributed to Barnes and Noble. It's been distributed to Scribd, as well as Overdrive and a few other locations. So it may not be on those shelves yet, but it is definitely live on Amazon right now. It's in the process on these other venues, but it is there.
Wow, and so basically everything that you've told us, you have pretty much put that in painstaking detail, and it's only $9.
But here's the thing: not only did I put it in painstaking detail, I wrote it in a way that anybody can read it. And this book that I wrote, I had enough research to make it a 500-page text, but I broke it down to 200 most important pages. I made sure it was stuffed with peer reviews, stuffed with investigative journalism, stuffed with sources and sightings, so that when people are talking to these feminists, you can use this book as a handbook to save lives, to show these people, look, here's a dishonesty, check it yourself. People can go online and they can look at my sourcing and see it is the truth. Once they see that, now all of a sudden, we've struck in a blow to this hypocritical ideology that has been destroying communities.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Bob, it's been great having you. Can I invite you on again?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great, because I would love to have you, because I want you to meet some of the people who I frequent with, and I think that they would love you. They probably would want to marry you. So thank you, Bob, for being on. You were great, and your book, I left a link in the description if anyone wants to go and buy it. It's called The Feminist Lie, and it was written by Bob Lewis. Thank you, Bob.
The only other thing I would say is this: I am a self-published author, so if you do read the book and you do like it, please write me a review, because that's how people know what the book is about.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, all right, guys. I'm signing off. Thank you, Bob, for being on, and maybe we can have you on again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.